Hey everyone. So, we're starting our new unit of genetics, and I'm introducing you to your genetics project. I will have this presentation for you along with this video if you need to go back and review. I will attach the rubric, and this project is due May 4th. So, I'm just going to spend some time quickly introducing you to the project in class just to kind of relate what we've already talked about and what we're going to be talking about, because what we just talked about in last unit about mutations, like point mutations and frameshift mutations. Also, when we talked about non-disjunction during meiosis 1 or meiosis 2, those can cause mutations and can be deemed genetic disorders. So we've talked about how a cell divides, produces new cells, right? So in order for a cell to divide and produce new cells, the DNA needs to be copied and replicated. We also explored how DNA replicates, how it's transcribed and copied into mRNA, so that way it can be translated into a protein. So remember, once again, genes code for proteins. We talked about that, and we also talked about a little bit about, what could happen if this goes wrong, right? While DNA is replicating, what are some things that can happen, or if DNA is being transcribed, what are some things that can happen? So we talked about insertion, deletion before. So remember, you can insert, a base can be inserted, or multiple bases, multiple nucleotides can be inserted where they're not supposed to be. Nucleotides can be deleted. And also, this could happen when we talked about insertion and deletion. We talked about how it happens when DNA, that was horrible, when DNA is replicating, that when it replicates, it could insert a couple of bases. So mutations can happen during DNA replication, or also can happen during the actual transcription when the DNA is being transcribed. So if DNA is being replicated or if it's being copied, sometimes bases will be, a mutation can occur and bases can be inserted, and that's insertion, or bases can also be deleted, and that's deletion. This can also happen, and we're going to talk more about this later on, but insertion and deletion, insertion can actually happen between two different chromosomes. So remember, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, right? So if you look at this picture here, chromosome 4, which is a completely different chromosome than chromosome 20, they're organized by size, and they have similar genetic information. Imagine if a part of chromosome 4 is removed and then inserted into chromosome 20. That's also an example of insertion. And deletion, here's a chromosome. Okay, an area of the chromosome can be deleted. DNA is no longer there. Translocation is one that we didn't talk about, but here's a picture of it. Chromosome 4 and chromosome 20 again, but let's say this part of chromosome 4 was put into chromosome 20, and then this part of chromosome 20 was put into chromosome 4. Now, looks similar to crossing over, right? But when crossing over occurred, it was happening between the same numbered chromosomes, which code for the same genes, and those genes code for the same, types of proteins. Here, it's two different chromosomes. So that DNA, the part of the chromosome that was switched, is not coding for something similar. So that can lead us to genetic disorders. We also talked about how cells can undergo uncontrolled cell division, right? AKA cancer, from having a mutation in genes. Also, non-disjunction. It's the failure to separate chromosomes during meiosis 1 or meiosis 2. So we talked about some of these in class, and we're going to discuss many others as well during this unit, and we're also going to talk about some possible consequences of each of these types of defects as well. Now, what is your presentation? What is your project? You'll be creating a 3 to 4 minute presentation on one genetic disorder. So that's going to require you to do some research. This is an individual project, so you're responsible for researching a genetic disorder that you're interested in and creating a PowerPoint or a visual presentation. So it could be a slides, PowerPoint, Prezi, any visual type of presentation. And then also, obviously, it's on a genetic or disorder that you choose. And then you'll also be presenting it. Now, we're not in class, obviously. So your presentation can be done in a couple of different ways. You can record yourself actually presenting it, so you can be in front of the camera and you can have your family members as an audience if you want, or it could just be you in front of the camera presenting and giving a presentation. Or you can do what I've been doing with these Edpuzzles or like my YouTube videos. You can just record an audio of yourself presenting, so you can have your slides on the screen just like I'm doing right now, and then just record audio over it. And you can use, several different apps for this. There's Notability, which is what I'm using. Screencastify you can use, or, some other program that you discover. Or if you don't feel comfortable presenting in any of those formats, even though I strongly encourage you to do so, you can provide an entire written transcript of your presentation. So word for word, what you would say. And, a simple way to do this is just to record yourself and then write down word for word what you actually said. It's your preference. So those are the three options that you have to present your project. So you're creating a visual presentation and then presenting it. It needs to be in between 3 or 4 minutes in length. I'm not sure how that works with the transcription of your presentation yet, but for recording yourself or, your audio, 3 to 4 minutes in length. And also you will be picking a topic and I must approve your topic. So I have a sign-up list, thing that I did for when we did the cancer harkness. Take your time in picking your topic. Do some research first. So it tells you on the document for the project to start by researching a couple of different genetic disorders before you sign up for one. Once you sign up for it, you're locked into that genetic disorder unless I don't approve it. But you just type in your name, type in the genetic disorder that you choose. And if you're the first one to sign up, obviously it'll go in order. Make sure that nobody else signed up for it, but we cannot have any repeating genetic disorders. So once you sign up for your genetic disorder, if I'm not approving it, I'll send you a private comment. If you do not receive a private comment once you sign up within 24 hours, then you know that your topic is approved. So what does your presentation / slides need to include? So you're researching a genetic disorder, whatever genetic disorder that you choose. Your presentation needs to specify the specific genes and chromosomes involved, if known. So if you can find the specific gene and specific chromosome, include both. You may only be able to find the specific chromosome or the specific gene. So this requires you to do some research. Then describe the chromosomal or genetic defect that led to that disorder. So, what was inserted or what was deleted, depending on your disorder, what leads to it. If known, again, it depends on how common your genetic disorder is. Also, which protein does it affect? Because once again, genes code for proteins. So the genes are going to be mutated, right? The DNA is going to be mutated, or the mRNA, when it's transcribed, is mutated, and that's going to mess with the proteins. So what protein does it affect? And also, how does this protein lead to physical symptoms? So a physical symptom noticeable for that genetic disorder. Include graphics. So I want you to include a picture and or karyotype. Here's a karyotype. We've seen one before. It lays out the chromosomes, all 23 pairs of chromosomes. So try and find one for your genetic disorder. You want to include pictures. And then at the end of your presentation, a final slide that includes your bibliography with all of your scientific sources. At least 4. Okay, so minimum of 4. Also, do not use .com sites unless you ask me first and get them approved so I can make sure that they are a reliable source. So you want to look for sites with, .org, .edu, scientific articles, scientific journals. So utilize, the scientific database similar to what you did for your lab report. Now, I'm not sure how familiar you are with making effective presentations. I know that sometimes teachers preach on what presentations look like when they're effective, and then also some teachers then have like a million words on the slide, which is not showing and demonstrating an effective presentation. It's a little hard with virtual learning. We kind of have to have a presentation that has a lot of details in it, but you will be presenting this. So your presentation for your viewer is just hitting the main points. So in your presentation, you want to use images. So let's say, like I told you, you want to include a karyotype. So if I'm including this image, you do need to include where you got the image from. Now, I don't really like the format of you having the URL address on the presentation, but when you're creating your slides, there's the section underneath each slide that's called speaker notes. You can put the URL in the speaker notes. I'm completely fine with that. I actually prefer it so that way it doesn't look like this on your slide. Okay? So you can use your own image if you create one, or find them online, and then just make sure that you give credit to where you got it from in the speaker notes. Include some text. You want to include bullet points. You don't want like paragraphs. Text should be minimal. Bullet points with the main topics, with the main points that you're going over. Then you have the ability to utilize your speaker notes if there's something that you want to make sure that you say during your presentation, especially because you're recording it. You can type in the speaker notes and that will be there for you while you're presenting, depending on what format you're using, and you can utilize those speaker notes. Okay? You don't want to have any silly memes or images, because this is a serious, a professional presentation. And in the future, when you do presentations in college, they're not really going to want to see any memes. Okay. Also, my big pet peeve is having a slide at the end that says thank you. Do not thank your audience for listening to your presentation. They had no choice. So you don't want to thank them at the end of the presentation with a thank you slide. In reality, if this was in front of the classroom, you could have a slide that says questions at the top, and welcome any questions, but no need to have a thank you slide at the end. And you don't want to have a lot of writing. Like, look at this paragraph. You do not want to have this. You don't want to be sitting there reading off of your slides. It's boring. You want the person who's listening to your presentation to be engaged, and also not reading off of your slides, because if you have a bunch of words up there, your audience is going to want to look at the words and they're going to miss what you're actually saying and what you're going over that's important. So you want to have minimal words, explain what your words or your images mean. Don't write a paragraph. And yes, so an example of what you don't want. You want to use a neutral background, say simple, don't overdo it with a whole bunch of colors. I love a good template presentation, a nice pretty one, but I try and keep it simple with the colors. Stay with neutral colors. You don't want to go too crazy. So for example, like you don't want something like this. It's very hard to read with this color background. Same thing with this one. And this one, you don't really want to choose solid backgrounds of these colors. And you also don't want to put a giant picture on your background, because it makes the text hard to read and the picture is not clear. Use simple fonts. These fonts are great. Keep it simple. Keep the text size pretty standard, like 16 point is a pretty good font size for a presentation, or maybe, 18-point font. Don't use any fancy fonts or any bright colors or light colors for your text because it's very hard to read. Okay, so hopefully that gave you a good idea of what your presentation should include. Here's a sample rubric. I put that some criteria may need to be changed. For example, there's this section on the bottom called Listen to Other Presentations. I'm not sure what we're going to do about that yet. All of the other criteria is up to date. 3 to 4 minutes, speaking clearly, good understanding of the content, that you're prepared in your presentation, that you're not stuttering or taking long pauses, accurate content, making sure that it's factual, including all of the points that you need to include, which I should add in there in that rubric, making sure that you have all of these things listed up here. Okay, the must include section, so you need to make sure that you include that. I believe that falls in under this part, 5 accurate facts, because there were 5 bullet points up there, I believe. Graphics and, the overall attractiveness and layout of your presentation. Also, grammar is always on there. Here's an example of a presentation that somebody did previously for this project. So notice how there's not a lot of words on the slide. It stands out what they're trying to get across. And obviously, the presenter would not just stand up here and just read these numbers, right? But they would go into more detail when speaking about it. The presentation is just a guide to basically help you and guide you in where you're going with your presentation. It's also there for the listener to be able to pick out the main points. Here's a picture. I'm blanking out the genetic disorder. That's why there's this box there. But here's a picture explaining what happens for this person's genetic disorders. So again, main points, even if you could get somehow less words than this, that would be great. But the overall main points of inheritance patterns that they found within their genetic disorder, and then, some life expectancy. Here's some pictures. So there's a little example of a pretty good presentation for you. So as always, let me know if you have any questions. I'm here to help you. I will send out, some reminders, but the due date, again, is May 4th. That's the due date for the presentation, the slides, or whatever you choose to use to present on. And then also, your visual and your actual presentation of your audio, your recording, or your transcript. Okay? So start doing some research.